Hi, my name is Janice Gray, and I'm going to be discussing Chapter 1 of Johnston's book called Radical Behaviorism for ABA Practitioners. The title of Chapter 1 is called An Unavoidable but Reasonable Assumption. This chapter starts off with a little story about a meeting that's taking place. The meeting is taking place for a young man named Robert. Robert attends a day program, but when he gets back to the group home, he gets himself in trouble by irritating other residents there. So the meeting is being held to look at this behavior and decide what's going on and what to do about the behavior. In the meeting, there are several people. One is Zoe, who is a consultant to the house and other houses. There's a psychologist there, a social worker, the group home manager, and a behavior specialist for that particular house. And so in the meeting, the people in the meeting have different views of the behavior. For example, the psychologist, she just thinks he has free choice and he doesn't have to have a reason why he does it. So does the social worker. But the consultant, she doesn't think that he should be forced to participate in the activities, because what happens is Robert doesn't want to participate in the activities. And so what he does, he doesn't do it, and he just goes around irritating other people. She says that he shouldn't be forced to participate in activities that he doesn't want to, but she was more interested in why he feels like he would just rather not participate, and he would rather irritate and bother the other residents. And she kind of thinks that maybe there's something that is reinforcing this behavior that he has at the group. The chapter after the story talks about the idea of free will or determinism. You talk about free will, you're talking about people having a choice. It's coming from the inside, something that you decide on, your mental activity, that your choices are not influenced by the environment or your hereditary. A person makes a decision that's independent of influences, physical influences. And the other part of it was determinism. Determinism would be the outside, and determinism would be we making choices that have been influenced by our environment, our hereditary, and those factors determine how we behave. Free will. Free will believes that the choices are made by one's decision. They're not influenced by the environment or any hereditary factors. The author gives an example in the book where he says, how people will say, well, I've made up my mind, or I simply decided. I don't know why, but I simply decided it. So what they're saying is some type of mental deliberation or thinking about the decision a person has a choice. You talk about determinism. It believes that our behavior is fully controlled by outside variables. It seems that there are physical causes. Now, when you talk about both of the theories, free will and determination, both of these are the competing theories, but it would be totally impossible to prove either one. One reason, if you talk about free will, it's impossible to prove that a behavior is not influenced by outside factors. And then if you talk about determinism, it's hard and impossible to prove what those physical causes are for specific behaviors. Later in the chapter, Johnston talks about several issues and several points to think about when you're discussing free will or determinism. One of the points that the author brings up later in the chapter is the non-physical causation. And he poses the question of how can something that's non-physical, like maybe the way you believe, the way you think, affect something that's physical, which is the way you act. He also goes down to talk about responsibility. We raise children to always take responsibility for their actions. So if you're talking about determinism, then Determinism is saying that your behavior is already set because of your influences of your environment or your hereditary. So you don't have any control over it. So who's responsible for your behavior? And the thing about your behavior is that the consequences of your behavior sometimes will influence your behavior in the future. The author also talks about feeling free to act a certain way or make a certain decision. Sometimes he talks about if a person feels threatened, then they'll make a certain decision, and that's influenced by the environment and not necessarily is their free choice. It could be a social setting. For example, if you would act a different way if you're going to a party with your friends, you're drinking, it's loud music, then you would act if you were going to a black tie event. The people there are all dignitaries. You would definitely act a different way because of the influences and probably the consequences that you believe that you would have if you performed in a manner that was opposite of what everyone else was doing. He touches a little bit on choices and preferences, how most people use the word choice and preference interchangeably, but it's really not. A person can make a choice about something because they prefer of doing something in a certain way. And the choice they make is based on past experiences from their environment, maybe the consequences that they had. Johnson also talks about freedom from physical constraints. People make decisions based on their physical constraints, what they can and cannot do. One example that he gives in the book is talking about if you need something from the top shelf, you're not free just to reach it there and get it. You would have to get a stool. He also talks about I would not walk a tightrope because I haven't been trained. So I could not physically do that because I'm physically restrained. I don't have training in it, and I know I wouldn't make that choice to do something like that. And finally, he talks about spiritual freedom. It's not necessarily talking about religion. It's talking about if a person decides that he wants to pursue those things in life, like a lot of money, a lot of houses, expensive cars. If they choose not to do that, then they're free. They free themselves up from working all the time or just constantly sacrificing or doing certain types of jobs that could get them that kind of a lifestyle, and they're not concerned about the approval from society or their friends. So if you look back at the beginning of the chapter, there was the story about the young man named Robert. There was a setting where there was a meeting, and you had different individuals who were meeting to decide what to do about Robert and his disruptive behavior after he returned from his day treatment. In the meeting, practitioners usually look for, what's causing the behavior. They work with families. They look at what's causing the behavior, and usually the focus is, what's going on inside the person that's causing them to act a certain way. Well, now you have to look at it at a different way and look and see, is it coming from the inside, or could it also be coming from outside factors, from the environment? Could those factors be influencing this individual's behavior? So, at some point, all those pieces need to be looked at, and you're going to have to convince family members, different professionals or paraprofessionals, to look maybe on the outside to see if there are some influences that are affecting the behavior of the individual. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on behavior? Do you think that people have free will, which they have total control of their behavior? Or do you think that determinism is in place? Do you think that a person's behavior and the way they act has already been determined by their environment and there's no free will? The author does mention something in the book called soft determinism, and that is defined as behavior is determined by the events that happen in your life, but free will comes into play when it allows you to act a certain way according to your nature, which has been shaped by your environment. When thinking about my own answer to this question, I know situations where a person's environment I feel like was determined by the way they were raised. A person who was raised in an abusive home may grow up to be an abuser. But I also know people who were raised in an abusive home who made a choice when they got older that they weren't going to live like that, or they were going to have a different path. So, I'm not sure if I could go with either free will or determinism. I'm looking at probably maybe soft determinism will both play a part. I look forward to listening to your responses. Thank you.